I never thought a pot of stew would end up changing the entire course of my marriage. My name's Sarah Mitchell. I'm 36, and I've lived in Portland, Oregon for most of my adult life. I'm not a chef. I'm not a food blogger. I don't even own a fancy Dutch oven. But I've always believed food is love. That's something my mom taught me when I was little. Growing up, she didn't have a lot of money, but somehow she always managed to put something warm and filling on the table. Meatloaf Mondays, chicken and rice Fridays. During the holidays, the kitchen would smell like cinnamon and nutmeg for days. When I met Mark, my husband, it was over brunch. We were at the same table at a mutual friend's wedding after-party. I remember how he leaned over and asked if I was going to eat the last biscuit. I laughed and gave it to him. He told me later that moment sealed it for him. Any woman who shares her biscuit is wife material. I thought that was cute. Mark wasn't cruel in the beginning. Sarcastic, yes. Critical? Occasionally. But it was always in a joking way, or at least that's how he framed it. He had this way of saying things with a smirk that made you question whether you were being too sensitive. Like the time I wore a green dress to a dinner party and he said, "You look like a sexy jalapeno," then laughed like he just made the best joke in the world. I laughed too, but later, in the bathroom, I stared at my reflection and wondered if I looked ridiculous. But back to the stew. We had just moved into a modest 2-bedroom house in the northeast part of the city. Nothing fancy, but it had a cozy kitchen with a little window that overlooked the backyard. I'd always dreamed of having a backyard herb garden, and that spring, I planted rosemary, thyme, and basil right under that window. It was a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day where the clouds hang low and you can hear the water pattering against the gutters like a lullaby. I had been watching an old episode of The Barefoot Contessa, and she made this coq au vin that looked absolutely divine. I thought, you know what, why not try something special tonight? Mark had been complaining lately that our dinners were too basic, said my food tasted like something out of a hospital cafeteria. So I went to the store. I got the ingredients: red wine, pearl onions, mushrooms, fresh chicken thighs. I even bought the good kind of broth, not the cheap one I usually settle for. I came home, put on some jazz, and got to work. I chopped and sautéed and deglazed like my life depended on it. And the kitchen, it smelled like Paris. At least I imagined that's what Paris smells like. When Mark walked through the door, I was just setting the table. 2 candles, cloth napkins. I even chilled a bottle of wine we'd been saving. I felt proud, maybe even romantic. I wanted him to taste it and see me, really see me. He sat down, looked at the plate, and said, "What is this supposed to be, a crime scene?" I blinked. "It's coq au vin." He poked the chicken with his fork. "Looks like something that crawled out of the swamp." I laughed nervously. "Just try it." I followed the recipe to a T. He took one bite, chewed, then made this exaggerated gagging sound and pushed the plate away. "I can't eat this," he said. "It's like eating boiled wine and regret." My stomach dropped. I stood there, frozen, trying to hide the hurt, but I could feel it rising, hot and thick in my throat. "I spent all afternoon making this," I whispered. He shrugged. "You spent all afternoon ruining perfectly good ingredients." And then he laughed. This full, open-mouthed laugh like he just nailed a killer punchline. I wanted to disappear into the floor. I didn't say anything. I picked up the plate, walked back to the kitchen, and silently dumped it into the trash. I heard the soft thud of the chicken hitting the bottom of the bin. That was the sound of my heart breaking a little bit more. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there next to him, listening to his even breathing while my mind churned. I thought about my mom, how no one ever laughed at her cooking, how she made every meal feel like a warm hug. I thought about how, somewhere along the way, I had stopped seeing myself as someone worthy of tenderness. But I didn't leave. Not yet. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't believe I could. 3 days later, everything changed. Mark's company had sponsored this weird local fundraiser for a food charity. They partnered with a culinary school, and to raise money, they auctioned off a private dinner cooked by a local celebrity chef. Somehow, Mark's name got picked in a raffle. He came home grinning. "Guess we're having dinner cooked by a celebrity next week. Maybe you'll learn a thing or two." I wanted to smack that smug grin off his face, but instead, I smiled. Looking forward to it. That night, I cleaned the kitchen until it sparkled. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove something, or maybe it was habit. When you live with someone who chips away at your confidence, you end up clinging to whatever order you can create. The chef arrived the following Friday evening. His name was Chef Dante. Mid-40s, tall, confident but not cocky. He had a warm smile and eyes that felt like they saw everything. I recognized him from a local TV show called Northwest Palate. He was the kind of person who made you feel calm, like everything was going to taste amazing. He walked into our kitchen, set down his utensils, and looked around. "Nice space," he said. "Simple, honest. I like that." I don't know why, but that made me tear up. No one had ever complimented our kitchen before, not even Mark. I hovered in the background while he unpacked his ingredients. He caught me watching and asked if I wanted to help. I hesitated, then nodded. "Chop these onions," he said gently, handing me a small pile. "Don't worry, there's no wrong way to cook, only learning." Mark walked in just then with a beer in hand and smirked. "God help him," he muttered. Dante's hands paused mid-stir. "Excuse me?" "Oh, nothing," Mark said. "She's not exactly what you'd call culinary material." Dante looked at me, then back at Mark. "She seems pretty capable to me." Mark snorted. "Trust me, I've been eating her disasters for years." Dante said nothing for a moment. Then he turned to me. "Would you mind if I tasted one of your dishes, something you're proud of?" My breath caught. I felt a flush creep up my neck. I, made coq earlier this week. Still got any left?" "No, I threw it away." He nodded, thoughtful. "Would you be willing to make it again? For me? Right now?" Mark laughed out loud. "Oh God, please no." Dante ignored him. His eyes were still on me, warm, encouraging. Something inside me clicked. I pulled out the ingredients. For the next hour, I cooked. With Dante by my side, I moved, like I wasn't afraid of being wrong. He tasted the sauce, adjusted the seasoning, showed me how to sear the chicken just right. He didn't take over, he guided. Like someone who actually believed I could do it, and when it was done, I served it. Mark picked at it with the same disdain as before. Dante took one bite, then another. And then he set his fork down slowly. He turned to me. "This is exceptional, rich, earthy, balanced. It's one of the best interpretations of coq au vin I've tasted in years." Mark blinked. "I'm not," Dante said calmly. "You laughed at this? You should be the one taking notes." Mark opened his mouth, closed it. I felt something rise in my chest. Not pride exactly, something deeper. Like I had found a piece of myself I thought I'd lost forever. Mark didn't say much for the rest of the evening. He just sat there, scowling into his beer, while Dante and I talked about food. Real food. Not just recipes, but stories. The way his grandmother used to make pasta by hand, every Sunday like clockwork. The soup he ate as a broke culinary student in Lyon, how food was memory, history, and healing all at once. By the time Dante packed up to leave, the kitchen was a mess of pans, empty bottles, and flour dust. But I didn't care. It was the happiest I'd felt in a long time. Before he left, Dante looked at me and said, "You've got something special. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise, not even him." He gave a subtle nod toward Mark, who was half watching us from the living room. I walked him to the door, and as he stepped outside into the night, I felt this strange sensation settle over me, a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. When I went back inside, Mark was already in bed. No thank you, no good night, just silence. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. No mention of the dinner, no acknowledgement of Dante's words. He just asked if I'd washed his blue button-down for work. I handed it to him and said nothing. That Saturday, I went to the bookstore. I bought my first real cookbook, Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking. I read it like a novel, cover to cover, scribbling notes in the margins, sticky tabs on every page I wanted to try. Cooking became my therapy. I'd wake up early before work to marinate things. I started using ingredients I couldn't even pronounce 2 months earlier. I made soufflés that rose perfectly, roasted duck with orange glaze, handmade gnocchi. I joined an online cooking forum, made friends. One of them was a food photographer, and she asked if she could photograph my dishes for her portfolio. I said yes. Then something unexpected happened. She posted one of my dishes, a rustic pear tart, on Instagram and tagged me. I only had a few followers at the time, mostly coworkers and old high school friends, but within a few days the photo blew up. People started messaging me, asking for the recipe, complimenting my plating. One guy asked if I'd ever considered teaching a class. Mark barely noticed. Or maybe he did, and just didn't care. He came home from work one evening, saw me photographing a roasted lamb shoulder in natural light by the window, and scoffed. "You're not seriously pretending to be a food blogger now, are you?" I didn't answer. I just kept arranging the rosemary sprigs. That night, I created a new Instagram account. At Herbs and Heart, I started posting regularly, 3 times a week, recipes, cooking tips, step-by-step reels. It felt good, like I had finally found something that was just mine. But Mark, he got worse. Every time I made something new, he'd find a way to insult it. "Did you get this recipe from a prison cookbook? I think I chipped a tooth on this crust. You trying to give me gout with all this butter?" I started to see him for who he really was, not just sarcastic or emotionally distant, but cruel, insecure, someone who saw my joy as a threat. I began to withdraw. Emotionally, physically, I spent more time in the kitchen, more time online with my cooking community, less time in bed with him. The space between us grew, but the more he tried to make me feel small, the more I quietly refused to shrink. 6 weeks after Dante's visit, I got an unexpected email. Subject line, "Invitation, Local Tastemakers Panel." It was from the Portland Culinary Expo. They were hosting a panel of local chefs, bloggers, and creators to speak about the role of home cooking in modern food culture. One of the panelists had dropped out last minute. They'd seen my Instagram. Turns out someone from the event team followed my photographer friend. They wanted me to join. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Me? A woman whose husband once told her she couldn't boil pasta without burning water? I said yes. I didn't tell Mark. The event was on a Sunday afternoon. I told him I was going to a friend's get-together. He barely looked up from his phone. I wore a navy blue blouse and jeans with real leather boots. Nothing fancy, but I felt good, confident. The panel was in this trendy little event space downtown. There were lights, a small stage, maybe 200 people in the audience. I sat between a pastry chef and a cookbook author. I was nervous, but when the moderator asked me about why I started cooking, something inside me relaxed. I told them about my mom, about that stew, about finding my voice through food. And then, halfway through the panel, someone walked in and stood at the back of the room. It was Dante. I locked eyes with him. He gave me a small, proud smile. My heart soared. After the panel, he came up to me, gave me a hug, and said, "I knew you'd do something amazing." He invited me to coffee. We talked for over 2 hours. About life, about food, about what it means to believe in yourself when no one else does. At the end of the conversation, he gave me a small folded flyer. "I'm opening a new restaurant," he said, "and we're looking for a few people to help develop the menu. Not chefs necessarily, just people with a good palate and a passion for food." I stared at the paper. My hands were trembling. "You're offering me a job?" I asked. "I'm offering you a chance." That night I sat on the edge of the bed while Mark snored beside me and thought about my life, my dreams, my silence. I didn't sleep. The next morning I packed a bag. Just one. I left the keys on the counter and a note on the fridge. "You laughed at me one too many times. I deserve better. I'm not afraid anymore." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked out. I stayed with a friend for a while. I joined Dante's restaurant team part-time, helped test recipes, wrote little blurbs for the seasonal menus. Eventually, I moved into a tiny apartment above a bakery that smelled like heaven every morning. My Instagram grew to 40,000 followers. I started a YouTube channel where I shared my cooking journey, the good and the bad. People connected. Women wrote to me, told me they'd been laughed at too. Now, a year later, I host small workshops in my kitchen. We laugh, we make messes, we burn things sometimes, but we learn and we heal. Last week, I got a letter from Mark. I didn't open it. I burned it over a candle while sautéing garlic, and the smell of garlic, sweet and strong, filled the air like a quiet victory. A few months ago, something happened that made me realize just how far I'd come. I was invited to do a live cooking segment on a local morning show, Portland Sunrise. They'd seen my videos and wanted me to do a simple fall dish for their cozy comfort food week. I chose my mom's chicken and rice recipe. It wasn't fancy or trendy, but it was meaningful. It was love in a pot. When I walked onto the set that morning, I felt nervous but excited. The kitchen lights were bright, the host was bubbly and welcoming. As the cameras rolled, I talked through the steps, chopped the onions with steady hands, and told the story of how my mother used to make this dish when the heater broke in the winter, how we'd eat it huddled under blankets, how she made me feel safe, even when everything outside was cold. At one point, the host asked, "What would you say to someone who's afraid to cook because they've been criticized or laughed at?" I looked straight into the camera and said, "You're not the joke. The people who mock your effort, they are. Cooking isn't about perfection. It's about intention. It's about love. And nobody has the right to take that from you." After the segment aired, my inbox flooded. Messages from women, from men, from teenagers. One said, "My boyfriend always mocked my baking until I stopped altogether. Watching you made me want to try again." Another wrote, "Thank you for saying it's okay to fail and try again. I needed that." It was humbling and healing. I started hosting small weekend retreats, Herbs and Healing, where women from across the state would gather at a rented farmhouse and spend the weekend cooking, journaling, and reclaiming parts of themselves they'd buried under layers of shame and silence. One woman, Emily, had lost her sense of taste during chemo. She hadn't cooked for 2 years. During the retreat, we made a lemon basil pasta. She stirred, cautiously tasted it, and began to cry. "I can taste the citrus," she whispered. We all cried with her. These retreats are the heartbeat of what I do now. I don't just teach cooking, I teach joy and dignity and worth. Funny thing is, people now call me Chef Sarah. I still feel weird about that title. I don't have a degree. I didn't go to Le Cordon Bleu, but I know what it means to serve food with heart. And maybe that's enough. Sometimes I still think about Mark. I wonder if he ever tells people about me, about how he laughed at me while I quietly became everything he said I could never be. A mutual friend told me he's dating a younger woman now. They say she's low maintenance. I hope she has the courage to walk out faster than I did, if he ever makes her feel small. But I don't carry anger anymore. Pity, maybe, but not anger. I don't need him to see me now. I see me. I see the woman who rebuilt her life over a stove, who turned pain into purpose, who fed strangers and helped them remember their own strength, one bite at a time. A few weeks ago, I visited my mom's grave with a warm container of coq au vin. I sat on the bench beside her and whispered, "You were right. Food really is love." I placed the container on the grave, closed my eyes, and listened to the wind rustle through the trees. I swear, for a moment it smelled like rosemary and red wine. So that's my story. I'm not special. I'm just a woman who got tired of being laughed at and decided she deserved to be listened to. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, mocked, or belittled for simply trying to be yourself, know this: you are not the punchline. You are the recipe. The full, flavorful, messy, glorious recipe. And you are enough. If you enjoyed my story, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories like this.